Meeting Peter Crone is like meeting Buddha, Einstein, and Austin Powers all at the same time. That's just, to me, the way that this dimension is set up. Why we're all here is because we arrive with these constraints, and the game is who can get out of them quicker than anybody else. Or that's the opportunity, is to break free from, as I put it, the constraints with which we arrive.
I think genuine, authentic experience of knowing that I'm not this body.
Yeah.
I pray that all human beings could have that even momentarily, you know, because it just changes the worldview.
Just the sense that we're at war, and it's a spiritual war. And the response is to become as large and bright of an embodiment of love in God as I possibly can, out of necessity.
It's like, no, my only job is to love. Now, have I fallen short from time to time? Of course, you know, but it's a North Star. You know, it keeps me on track.
Well, thank you so much for coming to sit with us.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Looking forward to chatting with you, and we've both been having fun diving into the world of the work that you do, which is really beautiful and quite profound.
Thank you. See if you feel the same when we're done.
We'll see. Let me know. I'll let you know in an hour.
I'm gonna kick my shoes off, as this is obviously a pretty casual place.
It is.
Absolutely. Right. So I'm really excited about having Peter here because, you know, one of the things that we talk about quite a bit is just the power of the vibrations of our mind and how it can really impact all systems, impact our reality, impact our loved ones. And then, you know, doing a little bit of homework and listening to some of the things that you talked about, just the way that you explain things and the way that you organize them, because, you know, suffering, we all have suffering, you know, but to contextualize that in a manner that is beneficial for our own evolution, for our love, to open our hearts, you know? I just think you just do I'm just happy to know you, a human being that's out there with a mission to contextualize these things, you know, in a really mature, in a mature container, mature way, you know? So I'm really excited to sit down with all of the things that we're gonna talk about today. But I was pretty impressed with, you know, just how you communicate.
I graciously accept. Thank you. If I'm just here to receive compliments, I can handle that.
That part's done now. Right? Hit him hard, Jared.
Let's get into the hard questions.
So what about when you were 14 years old?
And you
dug up this article on you from about 10 years ago. And, no, we're not those people.
I did drive my dad's car into the garden wall when I was 15, but
Grows you up.
Exactly. Definitely human.
So one thing I thought would be fun to start is you base your work around the mind, in a sense. You call it the mind architect work. But you're clearly working on all levels of the human experience. And for us, a lot of our work and where we swim is helping to find the connection to spirit and nature, God, whatever language connects you into that. But the relationship between the mind and that kind of cleaning up of our mind patterns and how that affects our connection to spirit. Because it seems like that's a lot of the work that you're doing, from what I've been able to understand from.
100%. Yeah, I mean, I go by the moniker Mind Architect because I found that any other titles out there were contaminated and they had sort of some other sort of interpretations. Like if I walked around as a spiritual teacher, there's this connotation that I might be a guy in robes, burning sage everywhere, which
you were earlier today.
Which I was doing most days, so that's to expose that. But anyway, it is really just a way to access exactly what you touched on, which is who are we really? You know, that sort of ultimate spiritual question of who am I? And so mind architecture really was an access point where it created curiosity. People would ask questions. There wasn't these pre-loaded assumptions about what I do. And it just allowed me then to sort of, in a non-threatening way, because I think even being a spiritual teacher, unless you're in that world, you know, where you tend to be used to yoga and kirtans and hanging out with friends and maybe doing plant medicines, you know, spiritual teacher could be misconstrued as somebody, okay, that's all woo-woo, you know?
Right.
And I really like to bring in science. I think the best compliment I got was from a journalist in the Financial Times in London. We did an interview, I helped her with some stuff, and she afterwards wrote, meeting Peter Crone is like meeting Buddha, Einstein, and Austin Powers all at the same time. Which I thought was perfect, you know, because it included the spiritual aspect of Buddha, like really finding the kingdom of the Lord within. Einstein speaking to the science of if you look through a lens of I'm not good enough, then you are going to have the commensurate experiences of inadequacy and compensations of being a people pleaser or a perfectionist. And then Austin Powers, obviously I'm British and you can't take shit too seriously, baby. So it is really a means to discovering our true nature, you know, like looking through the lens of the mind, because the mind to me is really the bridge between the matter, the manifest and the unmanifest of the spirit. And so it's the place that makes the difference. I use analogies a lot to help people understand. If people go and watch a movie at the theater, they sit in their seats with the comfort of whatever it is, a friend, a lover, and they have popcorn and they're looking up at the screen. And the illusion is that what they're watching is over there in front of them. Now, it's not. That's a projection, right? And we could say that equates to people's lives. They're like upset because of what they saw on the screen or in their life. But you're not upset by that. That's a projection, which is really a reflection of the fact that at the back of the room, which is where the film is, in the projection room, and the light that is the being, the soul, the spirit that is shining through what the subconscious narratives projects into the world. So you hear somebody say something, most people don't actually hear what they say. It goes through the filter of their own threat mechanism, which is at the back of the room, in here in their subconscious. So in order for me to show people in the analogy the light that they are, pure possibility, I have to be able to expose what's in the way of them seeing it. Or as you know, my catchphrase, I say, I can't give you something you don't already have. I can just remove what's in the way of you realizing that. So it also becomes a very empowering way of helping people versus sitting in a therapy session every week and going through the same shit. Like, you need to talk to me in order to be okay because you have problems. I'm like, you know, I often say, I hate to break it to you, but there's nothing wrong with you. And the number of people that defend themselves against that, it's quite staggering.
Yeah, I'm not totally familiar with your work, but I'm a little bit familiar with your work.
Yeah.
And what I really liked is the concept of beliefs and behaviors. And I think that it's interesting. I've heard different people work with it, but the dissolving of those concepts to see what's behind it all, I thought that was really powerful. You know, one of the things that we've shifted quite a bit on in the experiences that we create is that, let's say someone does like a breath exercise, right?
Yeah.
So we don't just go through the breath exercise for like the physiology. It's the moments in between the sets where there is just peace.
Yeah.
You know, because you get so much prana in yourself,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden you realize you're in peace and there isn't thought waves, right?
Yeah.
And then slowly the thought waves enter into the space. You kind of see them kind of not be there and then slowly start coming across the consciousness, right? But the interesting thing is that what we've started pushing now is that create containers where people can experience beingness or awareness. And in that non-thinking, non-doing, there's something in that subconscious that just heals that human being. Does that make sense? As opposed to, you know, me really like getting into the mechanics of what their thought processes are, but like, so that's kind of what we're really experimenting with, like creating little containers for people to experience just that beingness, that awareness, and that being self-healing on their journey. In your philosophy of the containers that you're creating, like how are you going about giving them access to that light and that projector that you're talking about?
A couple of ways. I mean, I love the fact that you speak to, again, one of my quotes, I say, I don't solve problems, I dissolve them. Right? Which again, it's empowering, and it's also speaking to the fact there's nothing to be found. We're so convinced and seduced, obviously, by marketing society that what we're looking for is exogenous. It's outside of us and it's in the future, right? It's not here, but I'm getting there, which of course just creates suffering and stress because if you don't have something, then you're in a position of lack. So dissolution is for sure part of my approach. And talking about awareness, I always talk about the two main buckets of my work, which is we start with awareness, which is really to bring light, you know, in the true traditional sense of what a guru does, not that I'm calling myself one, but that we bring light to that which you can't see. As Carl Jung said, you know, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will drive your life and you'll call it fate. And that's how most people live, right? So that which they are oblivious to is driving their thoughts, feelings, actions, and results, like that cascade of creation. And so they're just otherwise victims of circumstance, not realizing, no, the way that you're currently wired, the narrative and the dialogues that are a very intrinsic part of your identity are driving all of the things that are happening, even energetically, the circumstances you're attracting. So that's the reverse engineering of my work is someone tells me that they deal with, sort of the everyday anxiety, depression, relationship, finance, health, whatever they think their problem is. But in their storytelling, I can hear the deeper recessed prison of their subconscious that they're confined within. And so my process then, sort of very akin to like being a magician who knows how the trick ends, but the job is to take people on the ride so they have the wow factor, not seeing what they couldn't have previously known. So that's the process, is I hear the story, which is symptomatic. I then make some sort of correlations through questions of like, okay, where else did you feel not good enough? Or where did you feel you weren't safe or not wanted? Oh, well, I just remembered, like, yeah, when I was 6, my dad left my mom, whatever their story is, that sort of reignites that feeling of not being wanted. And then we can start to see, well, you made that up based on an event, and you think the event is why that's how you feel, right? And so to be able to separate the event from the story, then all of a sudden, it just vanishes. And that's when you get the wows. And that's where people's facial features will literally change. The process of dis-ease that I talk about, which is the precursor to disease. I mean, the things that I've seen just completely vanish. Okay, if it's a deep-rooted issue, then it might take a few weeks or months, but stage 4 endometriosis, a girl in my mastermind, 2 months afterwards, doesn't have it.
See, you're so damn empowering. I think I've heard people play with these concepts or communicate with these concepts or teach these concepts or create containers of these concepts, but it's so damn empowering. Like the human potentiality that you're talking about. I think, one thing that might be good, we talk about we have a certain following or, our community. We talk about the 4 concepts of conscious mind, subconscious, superconscious, and unconscious. People define these slightly different, but you're talking about the subconscious. Do you mind telling us a little bit more about what you mean by that and maybe giving us a little color? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard all of those different delineations, and I think they're appropriate in different conversations. For simplicity's sake, I just talk about the subconscious as that which is just beneath the surface, right, as sub implies. So unconscious is a whole another realm, and subconscious to me, I use analogies, as I said earlier. So imagine this building, which is a pretty good size, whatever it is, like a good 2,000-3,000 square foot space. It can only exist because of the foundation. Right, if we had a foundation that was built for a 500 square foot studio, you can't build this structure. So likewise, when someone's identity gets formed and they have these conscious stories and beliefs to me belong to the subconscious dialogues. So the subconscious is really the foundation of somebody's identity. Their identity with their conscious thoughts, they know that they don't get along with their mother-in-law. They know that their dad has a drinking problem. They know that they have a tendency to drink too much themselves as a byproduct. All the things that are known sit on top of that which they're oblivious to, but nonetheless informs their thoughts, feelings, and actions. So it's just beneath the surface. It's really what we developed during the formative years of our childhood. And many of the subconscious programs are super useful, right? We know how to drive, we know how to walk, we know how to put a fork in our mouth without sticking it in our eye, hopefully. Some people struggle, but
Can we talk to my son about that?
he's still learning. Patience. So those patterns of how we just fundamentally function, great. I don't want to have to relearn how to walk every time I get out of bed. That would be, obviously quite frustrating. But the characteristics that are the pillars of our identity or our ego or our personality, those subconscious structures, typically, because of the default settings of what it is to be human, are skewed towards self-destruction or limitation and separation. That's just, to me, the way that this dimension is set up. Why we're all here is because we arrive with these constraints, and the game is who can get out of them quicker than anybody else. Or that's the opportunity, is to break free from, as I put it, the constraints with which we arrived. It's not because of your parents or your dad said this or your mom did that, then you're a victim of circumstance, and then you carry that through the rest of your life, and it's like you burnt your hand because McDonald's coffee's too hot. It's their fault. It's this fault, shame, guilt paradigm. But if you look at it as a spiritual being who arrived in this dimension with the opportunity to sort of slough off the limitations that you have carried through whatever many lifetimes, then it changes the way that you play the game, right? Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes sense. I just want one follow-up, and then I'll let Jeremy chime in. I heard you talking about, I'm not sure, I don't want to misquote it, so I want you to talk about it, okay? So it's like, you're not an asshole because your dad was an asshole. You just happen to be an asshole, but you don't have to be an asshole. Is that kind of something for me?
Yeah, I was telling you, sort of maybe, I don't know the concept,
like this,
exact. Yeah. So I did have a client who was a very successful hedge fund guy, and he came to me because he was also a scratch golfer, really great golfer. And he recognized that he'd won the club championship a couple of times, but now there was this sort of expectation because he'd done so well, which is what I deal with a lot of my pro athletes, because they become so good, they're getting paid millions of dollars, that they forget their humanity, right? They can't make mistakes, but they're going to, especially in baseball, which is a lot of my athletes. So anyway, he was developing the yips. So with short putts, he would, have these nervous reactions. And he thought that's what he was coming to see me for. Of course, there was a whole can of worms that we revealed underneath all of that. But at one point, he realized with his own volition, he was like starting to see his tendencies. He's like, oh my God, I've become the asshole at the golf club. Like, I drive through security, I don't acknowledge the guy. I go to the range, I don't talk to the clubhouse boy. I couldn't give a shit about I just want to be the best, And he realized the impact, to your point earlier, of who he was in relationship to his community. And so at that moment, he was feeling a lot of guilt and shame. And I said, no, dude, you're not an asshole. You just play one in life. And so just to give him the, both the responsibility and the reflection of it's not who you are. Just like no one is bad. A dog that comes up to you and growls and barks and is sort of seemingly vicious, that was a puppy at one point. That's learned behavior. It's obviously been mistreated. It's been hit. It's been neglected. I don't know, but it's hurt. And so, one of the posts that I've just put up on my Instagram that's gone crazy is this woman who was feeling a lot of anger. But beneath it, really, she's just really hurt. And her anger is that sort of feeling of the injustice of how she was treated as a kid, which I have compassion for, but she's still then a victim of her history. And, in this particular post, it just all comes out and it's beautiful. So yeah, that's the asshole. Everyone has the capacity to play one, but no one is one. Although now after COVID, I'm second guessing that.
There's more assholes than I understood.
Wait a minute.
Nicest grannies are assholes sometimes. Yeah. Lady, calm down.
They have the greatest capacity for being an asshole. But yeah, the world that we currently live in, I definitely was starting to think, wait, maybe there's actual evil in this frequency.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'd still, love always prevails, so I'm not going to entertain it.
And maybe that's the larger story we're in anyway.
Yeah.
Is that overcoming of love of evil.
Yeah, I mean, I work with, again, so many athletes. I'm an athlete to a certain degree. I love to work out. And, if I take one of my 240-pound MLB guys into the gym and give him 2 5-pound dumbbells and say, come on, let's knock out 10 curls. He's like, what are you
doing? He's walking right out.
Yeah, he's like, what are you doing? Like, we need that resistance in order to grow, right? So to a certain degree, developing the capacity to love, the greatest sort of conduit to that is to have something that's kind of unlovable, right? Like I tell people, self-love isn't about pampering and showers and, golden petals and, going to the spa. That's all wonderful. But to me, self-love is learning to love the part of you that feels really unlovable. That's a much bigger challenge.
Yeah.
One thing that strikes me about your work is that you're seeing it through the lens of karma, that you're helping people ripen karmas. We all come with a certain amount of karma, and we accrue all of these other karmas.
Yeah.
And in the Vedic sense, they talk a lot about ripening those karmas to be able to liberate and have freedom.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're able to pinpoint the troves of the big collections of karma for people.
Yeah.
And by bringing light and attention to them, help ripen them.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, and what's so fulfilling for me is regardless of the crowd that I'm speaking to, I was just at a conference with thousands of people, like everybody's got, as far as I'm concerned, in my sort of downloads, the same fundamental prisons in their subconscious. So everyone can relate to the story when I'm helping someone like the post I just referenced, the woman who feels anger towards the parent that didn't give her the love, that maybe mistreated her. Everyone can relate to that, even if you didn't go through it. There's sort of this underlying intelligence of like, that sucks, like I get it. But when I'm working in my mastermind, a 3-month program, and I'm helping somebody overcome the feeling that they're a loser or that they're not wanted, like the compassion that is present, through the Zoom with hundreds of people, it's so beautiful, because everyone can sort of vicariously have their own breakthrough, which is so beautiful. I don't need to speak to everybody for everybody to get their own form of liberation, because we can all sympathize, hopefully, empathize, and oftentimes fully relate as, holy shit, she's like, that's me, And that's why it's so nice that regardless of who shows up at my live events, I don't know who I'm going to pick on. I don't know their story. I mean, one guy had chronic pain from a ski accident when he was 18. And I help him show he didn't have chronic pain, and it's like, and then someone else was like pining after a love 20-something years ago who she thought was the perfect guy, and now she can't find a great relationship, only for me to show, no, he helped you. He was the catalyst to reveal the love you are. Like, everyone in the room got it. They're like, at that moment, the other hundreds of people that I didn't speak to who'd had bad breakups or were still thinking, I've fucked up, I let the good one go. It's like, no, maybe that was simply the inspiration for you to reveal how loving you can be and take that to life. Don't collapse it with one person. So regardless of the story, the details are obviously going to be different, but the underlying energetics that has people feel confined, everyone can relate to. And that's why it's so fun to do this, particularly in a group, because you hear the sort of the subtle ohs and ahs and tears sometimes of like, holy shit, like I might as well be talking to that woman in the back who's bawling, even though I'm helping this woman feel that she was a mistake because her mum said we didn't want you. But she's obviously got the same story or similar.
Well, they're burning that karma, right? Even if I'm just listening to someone else talk about it, there's something inside me that's like, oh, I had that reflection, what that person's talking about. I have the same shadow.
Yeah.
And maybe a little bit of that burns, which I really thought was interesting. You were talking about earlier. You're like, hey, maybe evil does, you said maybe evil does exist.
Yeah.
And one of the things that has been a common topic amongst our friends and, colleagues, people we've been talking about, is that there is darkness in this world, like blatantly obvious, right? But maybe that darkness is needed so the light can unite and they can shine. Does that make sense? Because it's like a necessity of the moment right now.
Yeah.
And who knows what kind of renaissance, what kind of worldview can come out of having to combat darkness or manipulation or control. And the cool thing is that's like from a macrocosm perspective, but from a microcosm perspective, I think is very similar to what you're talking about. Like my shadows, if I can just kind of contextualize them correctly, they'll just burn and you'll be free. Yeah. And maybe you can listen to the whispers of the divine when you burn these shadows, right? And sometimes maybe you won't hear the whispers of the divine unless you have an opportunity to burn them, And so just a little bit what dynamics are you seeing in the world of, are you seeing the light? Are you seeing any type of renaissance? Are you seeing people come together? Are you seeing a lot of the shadow work being contextualized for people?
For sure, and it's an ongoing conversation for myself. I can't sit here and claim to know exactly the unfolding of the evolution of humanity.
Right.
It's like I do the best I can to keep my fingers on the pulse of what's going on, but I feel in this particular paradigm, we are in the world of duality, right? So this is why the Taoist symbol is so profound, right? Like the yin and the yang, the light and the dark, the white and the black. I often joke, I say, when somebody, for example, let's say they were underwater, holding their breath, and I think of this just because I was recently doing some cave diving, and it's like you're underwater and it's sort of a little bit scary, but you come up and it feels so good to be able to get air. But if you look at even the process of breathing, respiration, you don't just constantly inhale, right? It's like, oh, it feels so good. But you also have to exhale, right? And the exhale, based on physiological understanding, is maybe less desirable. It's got waste products and it's you letting go of stuff. We could say that's the evil component of respiration.
Right.
So I think in this paradigm, they both exist, and I do, to answer your question, feel a collective sort of movement and trend towards more love, more light, more union. But I then wonder, to what degree does it also seemingly exacerbate the dark too, because of that balance, right? So a lot of people are saying, it's not that bad things are suddenly happening, it's just they're being exposed, right? They've always been there. And I think the degree to which people are starting to recognize the insidious nature and the abhorrent ways that some of these corporations have conducted themselves for decades.
Right.
And the whole world of, apparent healthcare, which is sick care and disease management, right? Which has its place. Triage, emergencies, awesome, take me to a hospital. but nothing to do with health as we understand it, right? Like the genesis of what it means to be a doctor is you learn the structure of anatomy, you learn the function of physiology and biology, and then the next step is pathology, like how do those things go wrong? And then the next step is pharmacology. That's the intervention. You know, and in our world, we have a whole suite of, you know, vihara, ahara, like diet,
Where
lifestyle.
the hell are the blueberries?
Exactly.
In that line, where are the blueberries? Like, why did it go from improper functioning liver to pharmaceutical? There are blueberries involved in healing.
If all you take from this conversation is just buy yourself some freaking organic blueberries and you'll be good.
No, but, I mean, like, those are the levers, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's a totally different conversation that I think there is more light, but consequently there's the occurrence of more dark. So that's why even for myself, you know, I'm Mr. Kumbaya, I love life, and, you know, wherever I go, I try to spread light and be a good human. But even I'm having the consideration of like, actually, there's some people out there who know what they're doing and it's nefarious. They know that they are killing people. They know they're hurting people. It's not like some kid who grew up in a violent household and his dad was abusive, that he's got domestic violence as a byproduct, not condoning the fact that he hits his girlfriend or his wife. That's horrible. Get her out of there. But we can have some compassion because that's what he learned, right? But then there's some people who are smart enough to know what they're doing and it's seemingly intentional. That's where I'm like, I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah,
but
what has that done to your worldview? I'm curious because I went through that same realization.
I mean, for a minute there, it sort of brought up some of my perhaps unresolved karma, which was, you know, feeling the frustration of being somebody who wants to help, who's trying to make a difference, who sees the possibility of humankind and the potentiality of every individual to realize the goodness of who they are. And it's like these people are fucking it up intentionally. You know, it's like you build this beautiful sandcastle and the dude comes over and kicks it and walks off. It's like, you can't not have a reaction. It's like, wait, I'm trying to create something of beauty here. So I think to begin with, there was a little bit of that, you know, subtle. It wasn't like I lost sleep, but it's like, whoa, there's people out there who are profiting from abuse. And that just, I think intrinsically in the system of a human being, it doesn't sit right, you know? So then I think I moved through that pretty quickly and I recognized, you know, not the naivety, but like the innocence of what it is to be a human being. We can't possibly understand the intelligence of what's at play here. If we look at it on the big scale, the size of planet Earth relative to the Milky Way, relative to the solar system and the galaxies and then the universe, it's like, I mean, we're just a pinprick. And then we're on that somewhere worrying about, you know, what someone else is doing across the road. You know, it's like, really get over yourself, you know? So I thought there was a little bit more of compassion, understanding that I just don't know what I don't know, and to tend to my own garden, you know, to not worry about these nefarious powers that seem to be out there, and rather tend to my inner terrain. Like, you know, the expression, I think it's an African proverb, you know, if there's no enemy within, the enemy without can do us no harm, you know. So it's, I could just keep doing what I'm doing to hopefully wake people up, bring more love, and hopefully that nudged the needle. But yeah, to begin with, I was outspoken during COVID, you know, a little bit of finger pointing and like, this is bullshit. And to a certain degree, I still think it is, but I'm like, I don't know if that really helps. I'm just gonna preach to the people who are willing to listen and get over their own version of evil that lives within them. And that way the balance shifts, right? If we're carrying that suffering, then however minuscule, it's contributing to collective suffering is what I want people to understand. Like, people say, oh, they want world peace, and I say, well, you can't have world peace when you're at war with yourself. Mm-hmm. So if I can help address that, world peace is a byproduct of people being at peace with themselves.
I think I went through a pretty similar sort of arc of outrage and just like, how is nobody seeing what's going on in this insanity?
They're killing people.
And then coming back to, for me, like a little bit of a different slant was just the sense that we're at war, and it's a spiritual war. And the response is to become as large and bright of an embodiment of love and God as I possibly can out of necessity, like in a warlike sense. Which is an interesting, I'm still kind of like finding what that means, but that it's like a spiritual, it's a survival for the spirit of mankind is happening right now. Like they're trying to shut that light out actively. And I feel like those of us that have some sense or connection to it, the imperative to shine as bright as we can and love and help as many people is the strongest that I've ever imagined it. And
and I think going back to the analogy I used of working out with my MLB guy with 5-pound dumbbells, like, you know, he needs the 60-pound dumbbells to curl. He needs the 80-pound, the 100, you know. So I think the degree to which we are sort of becoming more warriors, W-A, as opposed to warriors, W-O. You know, there's a lot of warriors in the world, and we're becoming warriors, right? I think that really, to a certain degree, there's a sense of gratitude for the resistance, right? You know, whenever there's tyranny, you get defiance, right? And so that world of duality is still at play. So I'm not really into art, but I lived in Carmel for a while, and there's a beautiful studio or gallery there with this guy who does sculptures. And I was so moved, you know, like a lot of my clients have art collections, and I'm like, really? You know, you can just buy your friend a house instead of that? He said, whatever. But I, you know, or respect where respect's due that I don't understand. But this art was really beautiful, 3D sculptures. And there's this one called Orpheus Ascending. And it's huge. It's got like a drape, and then this guy's got his arm wrapped around the drape, like that he's pulling himself, whilst his other arm is extended. And this woman, his lover, is draped over his arm. And the story of Orpheus Ascending is he's like a human, but with godlike powers. And the gods were jealous, so they sent his love to hell. And so this is the depiction of him retrieving her from hell. And to begin with, when I saw that, it was sort of appealing to the hero in me, the warrior who wants to do the right thing, you know? And it's like, he looks like the hero. But what I recognize is a subtler undercurrent to the narrative, which is without the feminine, which we could say is, you know, Gaia, the world of the Mother Nature, the masculine doesn't get activated, right? So if there wasn't anyone to rescue, if there wasn't any evil forces, if there wasn't any adversity, we as men sitting here, we don't get to activate the divine masculine. And it really awoken something in me for my own personal relationships where I realized that I showed up. I was a perfect boyfriend on paper, you know, like do all the right things. I'm kind, I'm loving, gifts for no reason, flowers, I listen really well, I hold space. But underneath it, that was to me a really beautiful reflection of maybe more the feminine aspect of love, which is nurturing, it's kind, it's accepting, it's when your kid falls over and has a boo-boo, it's like, come here, don't worry, it's okay, I got you, right? But masculine love has got a different quality to it. It's a stand for something. And I realized that I didn't have that in my personal relationships, which was hard to look at, you know? But then I was like, it really transformed the way that my girlfriend at the time felt like, holy shit, like I feel so held, so seen, so safe. And so I think that's what's coming online right now, which I think why there is maybe an intentional, you know, like sort of this dissolution of the masculine, right? Through whatever means, right? Transgenders, all of this. And it's like, no, we need men who are willing to activate the masculine form of love, which is not harmful, but it's fiercely committed to something. And so that, I think, is what's being activated right now. And we need the woman to save. We need the evil to have our, you know, sort of as a form of resistance to bring that strength forward. So that's the way that I'm currently seeing the unfolding of the game.
And you know, any poem, any song, any movie, any book, you have these dichotomies, these dualities, male, female. I think it's just beautiful. It's just, there's a beauty to it. Yeah. There's a beauty to the evil and the light rising, and there's a beauty to the yin and the yang, the male and the female. And I think when we look at it as we can still be a fierce warrior. You know, like, you know, the Bhagavad Gita, you've got Arjun. It's like, okay, with a yogic state, how can I become a container and let that divinity and source come through? And then just do my duty, whether it's a masculine duty or it's a feminine duty, or it's a warrior duty, or whatever the case may be. But there's definitely a beauty in it. And I think that if humanity can see the poetry in it, can see the storytelling in it, it's badass. You know, like we talk about, you know, one of the things we talk about is that, you know, awareness is like watching a movie. You know, like it's like, we all love watching movies. No one wants to watch a movie that doesn't have like a killer antagonist. You need Voldemort. You need Voldemort so Harry can whoop his ass. You know what I mean? So like, if you don't have the two, you can't do that. So that is the story. Isn't that the poetry? And isn't that why we have this human condition.
Gladiator,
and it would suck.
Braveheart, you know.
Braveheart, freedom.
Die Hard.
Yeah, exactly.
All of it, baby. And we're living it like we are William Wallace.
Yeah.
Cut that from the podcast. But you know, like we are that. You know, I think that's so badass. I think it's beautiful.
Tension and resolution, I feel like, is the dance of all art and all life.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're in a moment where the tension is strong.
Yeah.
And like, what a moment to be alive.
And within that container, typically, you know, the old expression of before every breakthrough, there's a breakdown, you know, and I think we're sort of on that precipice of so many people investigating what they do put in their child at birth, you know, like the first few months and all of these schedules and, you know, wait a minute, like, I don't know, there seems to be some sort of suspicion here about what's creating some of these imbalances, and why do kids who maybe don't have those seem to be super healthy and the other kids have a litany of problems from ADHD to whatever. So I think even though to begin with, both you and I, and I'm sure Mitesh and many others were sort of a little bit up in arms and like, this is bullshit, it's also, well, it's actually waking people up to what's actually going on. So perhaps it's not such a bad thing.
I would say Jeremy and I are probably very, like, he's one of my absolute best friends, right? So we're super close. And part of it, I think that if there wasn't these scales of things that were going on, these like mass manipulations, this kind of like darkness that's brewing, I don't know, maybe we could have been the coffee friends, you know, like they have coffee once in a while, or go on vacation once in a while, or our families have dinner once in a while. That could have been the case, right?
Yeah.
But me and him, like, we don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Like, we have to wake up. We have to go to work together. We have to create a media company. We have to create containers, because I think the moment is asking for it. So in this life, maybe in a past life, we might have been friends that could have like a beer every Friday or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Neither of us, I don't think, drink beer on every Friday, but bad analogy, well, whatever, right?
Tequila, whatever.
Yeah, whatever, tequila, shots of whiskey. So, but I don't think we have a choice. Like, our brotherhood probably is a large part that we feel is necessary for the moment, you know, if that makes sense. And I do think that it's interesting. One of the things that we've noticed, you know, here in Asheville and a lot of our friends is like, you have men's groups and you've got women's groups, and they're the divine
and
feminine.
they're different things.
We have different things, and like, but I think that there's this like, people are less and less in their homes, and I think weekly, monthly, like, I feel there's a coming together. I don't know if it's just our micro community, but I do feel more so that people understanding the need to come together and to have some type of light. Some type of light connection. So we work together, right? I would say that we don't have a choice, like, of not working together.
I feel like the need, I mean, for us, my part of what we're doing is so much storytelling. And what I hear in your work that I really connect to is helping people find their stories. And when you are able to tell and share stories of people healing and moving towards light and moving towards love, I feel like you find that warrior, or, you know, you can use so many different roles that we all play, but it wakes up in you. And there's something about sharing stories that's so innately human. And for us, elevating and putting a megaphone behind those stories feels like that's 100%. That's the work.
For sure. And I think, again, I'm reminded of early on, like, it's the paradox of the world that we live in, right? Because to begin with, people that were sort of perhaps, call it more awake or more aware, were just, you know, so disenchanted and frustrated by the lockdowns and the masks, and you can't even go into a supermarket, and it's like, I've lost my freedom, you know, this is bullshit. And I was, you know, for a little bit one of them, until I realized, actually, no, we hadn't lost our freedom. We were being woken up to the fact that we were never free in the first place. And then it's like, ooh, you know, we were oblivious to the fact that we were all going through the motions of our own sort of subconscious patterns. And so I think this is that rude awakening, the spiritual 2x4, in the means of what we might call the, you know, the nefarious types and the adversaries, but really is just an opportunity for us to become more responsible for where we're not free, which is why I love what I get to do, because somebody smoking cigarettes consciously knows that they shouldn't smoke cigarettes. I mean, there's a warning packet on cigarettes that's been there for decades and everyone knows, but they don't know why they're still doing it, because of the deep-seated patterns that create the suffering that then they seek relief from. And so that same as a microcosm is happening in the collective, where it's like, oh, we're doing things that we don't necessarily know why, or we're oblivious to, that are harmful, And so we needed this sort of big, like, uppercut to wake us up and go, oh shit, like, yeah, I might need to revisit some of this. So again, that's where the sort of the powers that be, the they that everyone keeps talking about, they're doing this. And whoever they are, and I have some semblance of understanding.
There is a they, I think.
There is a they somewhere. A very specific they.
They're all hanging out on an island, or they're all hanging out at some parties and stuff. But
the circles within circles of communist whatever. But it's allowing us, ironically, to go from thinking we were free to truly being free.
Yeah, I think seeing that as a gift, like going from the anger at it to the gratitude towards it, was a huge shift. And then that same reflection, like you're saying, to the same inner part of what I love about the process of understanding things through the lens of karma is you can stop resisting it in the same way. Yeah. Like you don't fight it. You understand that when you're going through something challenging, there's something that's being freed and liberated from it if you're awake and paying attention. Absolutely. And I feel like this happened on such a grand scale.
Well, in a concrete way, I'm so grateful, and this will be controversial, but who cares? Like the distrust for the government, it is a super, and we shouldn't trust this government at all. We shouldn't trust any government. The mass manipulation that's going on, the distrust for pharmaceuticals. There is an absolute place, like you said, from a triage perspective, there's an absolute place for pharmaceuticals, but the overprescribing of pharmaceuticals, there's plenty of research that the number 3 cause of death in the United States is the overprescribing of pharmaceuticals. But who talks about that? No one talks about that, right?
More people do now.
Well, more people do now because of this whole thing, right? The distrust of the educational system.
What I suggested, I said, especially, okay, whatever, without getting into the politics, but the more left-leaning, owned by the people that have got the money, the CNNs and all of that. Like if CNN had a death count, remember they had the death count for how many people dying of COVID? Creating so much fear, this mass psychosis, which is a known formulation of how you get people to, sort of submit to whatever it is that you're trying to do. Like, you create fear, right? Like this is a fucking thing you can't see. It's all over your Amazon packages. It's like, this is great. It's a invisible boogie monster.
People are coming home from work in their suits in China, just dropping dead on the street.
Right, absolutely.
You remember those photos
when for the camera that was still on and you see them get up. Okay, cut. Anyway, and then also the fact that, you need distancing, right? So what primal needs, safety, belonging. Okay, well, you can't be near loved ones, and then you're not essential. So now you take away safety, belonging, and value. It's like you've got them exactly where you want. But nonetheless, like if that whole death counter, I say with friends, can you imagine if CNN now continued to have a death counter of the people that died from iatrogenesis, which is medical error, pharmaceuticals and error. Like people are like, oh, fuck, don't take me to the hospital. I'm going to get off my medication.
That's a great idea.
That'd be a great death counter.
We need to start a news channel, okay, with that count on there.
Death counter.
Like literally, these are all the government and the different countries, the different states. These are all the people that they're killing have a death count. Yeah. Pharmaceutical deaths have like a death count. Yeah. And then my niece, she's in studio right now, and it's just like. The other institution is college. Like college has become such a bullshit. And it has been.
Who
even
sponsors colleges?
Yeah, exactly. Like I think people forget that before the mass growth of colleges, apprenticeship. What better way to become a doctor, a healer, a businessman? It's the apprenticeships. It's the lineages.
And
it's
trade, going into learning crafts.
Trade, day in, day out. Clean the shop, make the thing, do the thing. Instead, you got all these books.
Yeah. But even that's shifting.
Where the hell is the wisdom in that? They're just like regurgitating a bunch of crap,
Yeah, you just become a tape recorder. But I think so many parents now, again, as part of this awakening, that's the encouraging part, right? It's like even friends of mine, even sort of in, I'm not there anymore, but in California, who might be more left-leaning and just sort of do as you're told and, oh, no, the news is true. They're like, I don't know about this. I'm like reconsidering whether I want to have a hospital birth. I'm not sure I want to have my kids in school anymore, the homeschooling. And, so all of this is adjusting. People are waking up.
3 or 4 of my best friends actually have taken their kids out of school, and they first of all, they opened their own schools, and then they realized there were certain limitations in that. And now they're just like traveling the world with their kids and they're crafting these experiences. And these kids are just turning into these badasses, It's like you're taking them out of the indoctrination of, I don't know, we're usually not all into this politics, but either way, it's true though, it's a fact. it's like these kids are turning into these amazing souls, and all their parents did was take them out of school and just provide them the basic learnings that they need to do, math, arithmetic, but then they're exposing them to like, you know, feeding the poor and like learning to surf and like all of these particular things, learning to be in nature, doing like these solo experiences in nature. And these kids are turning into these powerhouses, you know.
Growing
like,
their own food, understanding where it comes from. Like the wow of like, wait, there was just a seed and now I'm like eating lettuce or I'm, whatever it is, hopefully not if they're Vata, but.
Yeah. Just throw some oil on it, it's all good.
Okay. What else?
I'm curious your relationship with hallucinogenics. And
okay, I'm on a bunch right now.
Perfect.
You can tell.
Me too.
How can you be so coherent?
In that process of kind of clearing karma, I feel like the hallucinogenics do it almost on an energetic level, if guided in a certain way. Somebody I worked with talked about, you know, you go into a session and you've got some problem, and you come out and you can move it energetically without having to get into the story of it in the same way. He said it's like a dog with fleas.
Right.
The dog doesn't care how the fleas got there. It just wants the fleas gone. And there's an energetic level that you can work at. And I'm curious the relationship between, if that's part of your kind of worldview of practices and how it connects to the mind work that you do.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you're maybe talking to the wrong guy because I've never done anything. I'm like a purist. Like I didn't do drugs in college, never done any plant medicines. I, however, can speak to it as best as I can intuitively. And also a ton of my friends have gone throughout the world doing their ayahuasca trips in Peru and down to Mexico to do bogar and like all sorts of the MDMAs to psilocybins and everything in between. So what I would say, without having had direct experience, is I think they're wonderful for the right person if it feels intuitively like a calling. What it does, again, tapping into intuition and listening and garnering information from people who've done it, it shows you something, again, that you didn't see previously. So I think it's in the realm of possibility, right? Which is whether you call it like poetically, I saw the light, or I saw the love, or I felt like I was one with God, these sort of very euphoric experiences, which can then transcend these other narratives that might have been creating constraint or suffering or disease. The one slight disclaimer I would have with all of it, because I have friends who've done it multiple times, and I don't necessarily I see some of their behaviors change a little bit. If I saw someone, for example, a human being who was just radiant, you know, in terms of their physiology, they had the most beautiful, passionate, loving relationship with their partner, married or otherwise, if they had a thriving business that was of service and making a difference, if they had full integrity in the way that the words that came out of their mouth really mirrored the action. And I was like, whoa, you just really seem to be this optimized human. What's your secret? And if they told me some sort of psychedelic or plant medicine, I would explore it. But I've yet to have that experience. That's not to say that the people that I know who've had those experiences aren't wonderful friends and good humans, but they're still calling me for counsel or help sometimes, or they have their woes, because they're human, no judgment. So I feel like it's great to get a glimpse of something that the mind or the being had never previously seen. And I think that's what we rely on as humans, like watching sports, for example, like kids who see, whoa, that was unbelievable, as like something that many people say watching sports. It's only unbelievable to your current perspective. Obviously it's believable because it happened, but it's showing where you're confined. And so when we get inspired by things that seem bigger than us, we see something that we could aspire to. And so I think plant medicine do that on the psychological and emotional level that really, really reveals something deeper, it's spiritual. But then if you don't do something about it, it's like you went to a great restaurant, had a great experience. You went to a great movie and got inspired to tears because it was really moving. But then you go back to your own life. So that's the only caveat I would say is awesome for the right people, but take that inspiration, and that's what they call that integration process, right? And really do something about it now.
I feel like that sense of potential is the kind of core of so many things. And I feel like you're talking to sports, art, beauty, nature. I feel like psychedelics do that for some people. But this sense that we can be so much more than we've been told. And then connecting that to a path of how to reveal that in ourselves.
And it often needs support, it needs structure, it needs counsel, it maybe need revisiting either a trip or finding somebody who's, walked that path before, right? And so that's why I think mentorship, like, having big brothers or having community, it takes a village to raise a child, right? To have elders, to have respect for people who've perhaps in a business or in a sport or in a relationship have gone through the ups and downs, and maybe you can avoid some of those traps, So I think having those profound epiphanies are beautiful. But I've also seen a lot of people who just go back to have profound epiphanies all the time. And they don't necessarily then do something about it. So again, I'm obviously not speaking from direct experience. My friends are like, dude, imagine with your mind if you did da-da-da-da. And I'm like, yeah, maybe, I don't know. Right now I'm not called. I might try something softer, more natural like psilocybin, microdose, and start to feel what that feels like. I'm not drawn to the ayahuascas or any of the bigger stuff. But that's just been my observation, witnessing, hundreds and thousands of people that I know through communities go through these journeys with really beautiful, meaningful, expansive experiences. Don't deny that. But then if that isn't integrated, it's equivalent to going to like an Ivy League school, although now we know not to go there.
Exactly.
Getting like the exposure to beautiful professors with a lot of wisdom, and then, just going home and getting shit-faced.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that, we're working on here at Soham, actually, we're looking to launch a product. And I think that whether it's psychedelics or like holotropic breathing or, whatever it is, see, so many times people are part, and there's a use case for this, okay? So someone might be part of like a lineage or learning certain like spiritual tenets or learning some rules, but like, are they experiencing, even for a brief second, we all experiencing the divine, it permeates through us, right? Yeah. But when you create a container where you can extend that experience, and it doesn't have to be through psychedelics. I think, we just did a camp for the youth that I was talking about, like 9 kids that we did it with, right? And they did holotropic breathing. We had all 9 of them at a young age do this. And this is literally, they're doing it was like pranayama for an hour, like in a safe way, lying down on the ground or whatever. Yeah. You literally had like 2 of the kids actually have out-of-body experiences. And so that, at that age, when you're 15 years old, you're like, wait a second, the stuff I've been learning in church or in temple and stuff like that is like, holy shit, like this is real. Like I actually saw myself. I think to break our faith or over faith that I am this body, like however a human being can do that, I think it's worth figuring out how to do that, like in this lifetime, and there's so many yogic kriyas and there's so many ways, some people that are naturalists, I know when I go to the ocean, our family, my parents grew up on the beach when they were younger, right? So we actually swim out pretty far. Sometimes it could be a little unsafe, so you kind of got to feel it out. We just lay on our back, like above, where the waves are breaking, right? Yeah. And it's just so peaceful. You just lay there and there's something, you feel unified and one with everything. So I think genuine, authentic experience of knowing that I'm not this body, I pray that all human beings could have that even momentarily, because it just changes the worldview of just how I see the world and how I interact with it. But by no means, I think there's a million different ways to do it. Music, there's mantra, all kinds of stuff. So.
Yeah, I think, I've done some breath work, and so that's my closest experience of having what you might consider to be out-of-body experience or something that breaks sort of the default network of the ego. And it was profound. So again, it's not to diminish the profundity of what people go through when they do it. Right. It's just the invitation to then do something with it, be responsible. I know for me, I was speaking at a summit in Utah, and I'd never really done breath work. And so I thought, check it out. And you got people wailing and crying, and I could feel the crepitus in my hands happening. And it was powerful. And there was about 80 of us in a room. The facilitator was beautiful, the music was powerful, and the whole context of the experience was perfectly curated. And so we sat down and she said, look, we only got 5 minutes, we can't go around, but who would like to share a little bit of their experience? And so for me, I went first. I said, I've never done this before, and the messaging, the insight, my epiphany was, the words were, and the feeling, the somatic experience was, my only job is to love. So if that comes through breathwork, psilocybin, MDMA, like LSD, I don't have a judgment, but what I noticed for me is it was so profound that I was like, it's not just like a cute fortune cookie thing.
Right.
It's like, no, my only job is to love. Now, have I fallen short from time to time? Of course, but it's a North Star. It keeps me on track that if my nature is to love, then that's now a purpose, that's a calling. And so whatever people get in their experiences, regardless of the means or the methodology, my invitation is like, if it's that profound, rather than posting it on Instagram, which is fine. but
no, don't post it on Instagram. Just say what it is.
Maybe live it.
Live it, baby.
And figure out how to close the gap between those experiences.
Yeah.
So that you live that more and more. That's something I think about a lot.
I just turned 50 and I totally agree with you. Like, it has come down to that. It's just, I'm going to love. And even like, I was thinking about writing this book, but it's got a weird title. But I was like, How to Love an Asshole. Like, literally, it's a book that I've had this idea of writing this book because, if you can love someone who has thrown arrows at you but you can genuinely just like love that person, there's nothing in this world that's gonna hold you back. Nothing. Love, and in fact, find your asshole. We all have had them in our entire lives, right?
We all have one as well.
We all have an asshole, but I'm not talking about physiological asshole. I'm talking about our people, just this life, how it unfolds. Find them and love them. Because the amount of spiritual experience, it's gonna be similar to a psychedelic experience because you had to shatter so many beliefs to love that person, and when you do it, like, you'll be free. So, and the last thing I'll say about this is that, including like psychedelics or kriyas or containers or breathwork or whatever, I feel that this is a little bit metaphorical, but it kind of isn't either. There's a reality. I think the divine, she's been whispering in my ear my entire life. And there are moments that I realize it, and there are moments that I didn't realize it. I think after doing a breathwork experience or having some type of container that I've been a part of, that connection, that tether, becomes super clear. Does that make sense? Now, how do you keep that tether alive? How do you nurture it? How do you, I think that's like mission critical. And I think when just having the experience is not good enough. I think being tethered to that divine source is the game, right? And how do you nurture it on a daily basis? How do you nurture it on a moment-to-moment basis? Like, the interesting thing is, another thing I've been experimenting a lot with is like meditating with my eyes open. So me and my wife have done an incredible amount of Vipassana meditation. We've probably been to like 20 or 30 courses, right? Yeah. And so this deep connectivity and silence, like when your eyes are quiet, sitting absolutely still where your breath slows, But now I think at this age 50, at least the transition I've had is two things. Love, like you're talking about. How do I stay tethered to that messaging, that divine messaging that's not my mind? Yeah. And then lastly, how can I do it as I navigate through this world? Like, how can I do it with my eyes open and not on my yoga mat? Does that make sense? So I think there is this, and I think it's great that people are actually having different experiences, whether it's like holotropic breathing, yoga, psychedelics, because I think it opens up conversation. Does that make sense? Now, how humanity is going to use that information for its evolution, I think that's next week. You know what I'm talking about, in my opinion?
Yeah, no. I think, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. I think these experiences are cracking the door into a new paradigm, right? Something we haven't seen before, and that's why I said the two main buckets of my work. The first one is awareness, which we touched on earlier, right? So whatever brings that awareness, bringing the unconscious conscious, the blind spot that you're oblivious to of, my God, I've spent my whole life thinking that I'm a mistake or I'm a loser, and I can see how that's informed my life. So bring the awareness to that constraint, whether it be through psychedelics or whether it be through coaching or whether it be through some sort of divine intervention, maybe even somebody has a heart attack, and it's that awakening of like, holy shit, like I've been treating myself terribly for decades and this is the wake-up call. The second bucket, which I think we're sort of starting to lean into without declaring it, is practice, right? So we have the epiphany, we have the insight, we have that euphoric moment, we have the satori, but now it's like, okay, great. Let's practice, and that's the repetitive cycle, the tether that you're talking about is the subconscious gets formed because we're in a particular state of mind in those formative years. But if we're going to alter that, we need repetition. You learn your scales on the piano. You don't do them once and got it dialed. You have to practice. And so repetition. If I realize my only job is to love, that's powerful. I can remember it was at a ski resort. I went to the top and there was this girl who was a friend of mine. And I literally, as I saw her, I just said, I really love you. And she almost burst into tears because it was so authentic. Wasn't in any underlying, sort of manipulation, or like, it was just like, it was genuine. And that was a practice of it. And it didn't stop there either. It's a continual practice, And so whatever it is that someone is being inspired by and being informed by on the other side of their constraints, which is beautiful, the default setting of what it is to be human is always going to be to that sort of self-destruction. And so it's almost like we need to constantly be working towards whatever it is that we're aspiring to, because as I tell people, if you don't consciously create a future, your mind will do it for you.
Absolutely.
And it's usually not that great.
What practices do you guide people to help embody that love? Like, what are the ones that you found?
Ironically, to look at where is it absent, right? So if someone in this case of wanting to practice love is, where are you not being loving? Because it's usually through contrast, you can see the absence of the thing that you're committed to, right? You know that you've got a beef with your neighbor right now, but you don't want to really talk about that. Like, that's where the treasure is, right? You know that you have ignored your father for 5 years because you want to still make him wrong for something. So practicing love is, or practicing whatever the choice is, compassion, kindness, or health, is to see, where am I not doing those things? It sort of seems counterintuitive, but that's the access. Is so go out there in the world, and as one of my more popular quotes, people share it on social media, I say, life will present you with people and circumstances to reveal where you're not free. So live life, see where you get triggered to shit and you get upset by people. That's your teacher. That's your opportunity. So that's the practice, is then to transmute that. Instead of having the typical reaction of whatever it might be, if you're, the stereotypical A-type who's more aggressive, pitta, and someone pisses you off, might be anger. It might even be like, start to raise your fisticuffs, If you're more kapha, your way of actually reacting might be not reacting and taking it on and pretending that you're okay, but really you're developing this accumulation that creates your disease, and it might be actually speaking up might be the practice. So it's not always the laws of opposites, but typically.
So the practices are behavior in the world, rather than any like daily personal thing to connect or to...
It could be both. I think the most powerful way that we start to assimilate new behaviors is to actually live it. You could sit at home all day and be like the greatest yogi. It's like my golfers, they're like, oh man, I'm perfect on the range. Yeah, but that's not where the pressure cooker of like an actual score counts. You look perfect, but really if we were to monitor where your balls go, you're all over the place, So it's right, really living actual life, be on the court, have the courage to go out there, take responsibility, apologize to the people that you've hurt. Not through fault, but responsibility. It's a very subtle distinction. We want to get rid of shame and guilt. Like I tell people, we're all doing the best we can within the limits of our awareness. That doesn't condone behavior, but at least it has an understanding about it, right? So if you can see, holy shit, that I have acted in a certain way, I've interrupted people, I react, I don't listen, whatever it is that people typically do in relationships, just take ownership of that, as a human being who's committed to being a better human being. And people are moved by that. They're really like, I just want to apologize because I realized that, fill in the blank. And they're like, holy shit, you've done that for years. That's pretty big of you to say. And so, yeah, now what I'm committed to is I want to do, fill in the upgraded version. Now you've it's like the firmware upgrade, for your phone, but with your community. It's like, here's the latest upgrade of me. If you could just all install this, and then you can also help me be accountable, So that's the practice.
And it creates such an intimacy with people too.
Yeah. That's true relating.
Well, one of my spiritual teachers is Jain, and there isn't a lot of kriyas or breath work or any of that type of stuff. And a lot of it is exactly what you're talking about. As we're understanding our interactions with people, they're building resiliency in these interactions and the spiritual teachings that can just pour out of that life, they're kind of like walking through life. So super powerful. Peter, I want to say that, our prayers are that may you be successful in all that you do. And then the light that you have within you, may it be spread, and may you impart wisdom to all the communities that you're a part of. I think the world needs, people like you that work on the stuff that you work about, and it's inspiring. And, I just want to let you know our prayers and our vibrations, are with you, like however, we can be advocates, for you. But thank you so much for the work that you do. And thank you so much for the time that you spent with us. From the bottom of our heart, we wish you the absolute best.
I really appreciate that. I really got that. That was very sincere, and it means the world to me. I still, at times get not shocked, that's a strong word, but surprised, the number of people who come up to me and will claim that I changed their life. And first of all, I'll correct them and say, I might have said something that inspired you to, but don't give me that much responsibility. But it's really humbling. I was just in Ibiza, of all places, in a random cave, that most people didn't even know exists. It's at the end of a private road and a long hike. And there were 3 people in ceremony there. And I was just there with my girlfriend, and this guy goes, Peter Crone? Like, really? Here? Like you? So it means the world to me. I will continue to do the best I can to help people discover their true divine nature and overcome suffering and remove fear. And as I tell people, free minds liberate souls and make the world a much happier place.
Well, thank you for joining us here. It's been really fun to chat and kind of just dive into different things and share ideas.
No, it's beautiful to see the work you're doing. I really acknowledge, I'm a beneficiary of what you've created. I'm here getting lubricated in places that most people would not want to know
every
about.
hole is
Exactly.
every hole is oily right now.
That's really loving the asshole.
Yeah, exactly. That's the way to love an asshole. A little bit of oil. We'll leave it right there. We'll leave it right there. Let's let the analogy go.
We got a chuckle from the crowd there.
Yeah,
so
exactly. Yeah.
And of course, don't forget your blueberries.
Exactly. Blueberries solve everything. People, eat your blueberries. It's got fiber. Don't worry about the sugar.
It's a pleasure to be here. What you've created, the space that you're building, I certainly am going to be an advocate for and support. And I will be back many times to make sure that this 3-dimensional meat suit is in tip-top condition and that I can continue to share my goods with the world. So thank you for supporting me in multiple ways.
Yeah, and one last thing, actually. Our prayer was, before we opened Soham, one of the things was we would like to create a container not only for anyone to come and have a healing experience. One of our intentions was, there's this phrase we were talking about, serving those serving others. Yeah. So our prayer is that people that are doing good work, in the world, for them to have the balance of the doshas, for them to have clear channels, and for them to be able to serve and do seva for humanity. Soham, a big part of our prayer was, when we built that, was to have a container for that. And so, thank you for coming, to Soham and visiting all of our entities. But, as part of our dharma is to serve those serving other people in the world. So, we appreciate it.
No, it's beautiful, and not to, belabor the conversation, but I think it's an important point you just made that so readily gets overlooked. And again, not as a slight on the allopathic system, but if you look at the health and the vitality of a doctor, you typically don't see it, right? And that's not because they're not a loving person who's dedicated their life to wanting to help. That's how they typically got into the system. But the way that the system treats even people there who are trying to be of service, you see that they themselves are really a reflection of disease, right? And I think it goes further, and if I could appeal, just because as a man, this is something I'm very passionate about, to women, to mothers, talk about the quintessential service provider, how many mothers are just distraught and run down and exhausted. So to all the men out there, husbands and boyfriends, in the most loving way, get your shit together and take care of the ladies out there, because I know when you hold space for a woman, and particularly a mother, not to do this because of this, but the return is 10x,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
you mentioning that, which of course is in the context of me, which means the world to me, but I really see how many of the most beautiful care providers in the world are oftentimes, because of their own patterns and their behaviors and conditioning, finding their own demise because they keep giving. And let's just make sure that the people out there that are in our own circles, our own villages, our own families who are showing up for you, make sure that they feel that reciprocated.
Love it.
Beautiful and important message.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great way to end it. Much love, man. Take care.
Blueberries to all.
All right. Blueberries, well, that's a t-shirt.
Yeah.